Oh my goodness! Oh my goodness! What a day! What a day! I'm gonna wait for folks to jump in. Let me know you're in the room. Let me give me a shout out. Let me know you're in the room. I'll have a good conversation today. A good one today. Let me know when you come into the room. Give us a shout out. Tell us where you are, where you at, where you from, all that good stuff. Let me know when you let me know what side of this Oscars debate you are on. It's gonna be a good conversation. We're not judging anybody today. We're not gonna denigrate anyone today. We really gonna discuss some things today. But let me know who's on, where you from, where you know what's going on with you. Can't wait to talk about this. Can't wait to talk about the Will Smith and Chris Rock incident on stage. And if you have an opinion about it, go ahead and throw it in. The only thing we ask today is just like, let's not denigrate anybody, judge anybody. You know, your opinion is your opinion. What up, fam? Michelle, what up? Your opinion is your opinion, but I'm interested in putting in the chat if you feel so inclined to share your thoughts um, about what happened last night. There are different thoughts about what happened. I've seen it kind of. I will say honestly, through my feed, it's not half and half. It's about like 70-30, right? 70% support Will and his actions, and 30% don't. So if you have a thought about it, please share it in the chat. I want to address my thoughts um, about not only about the incident, but really more so about our response, the universal response, right? Because life is 10% what happens and 90% how we respond to it. I am always intrigued by responses. And so I really wanted to address these two areas of life, and then add on the third component. Um, it's it's the independent variable. Love. Love is the independent variable. The dependent variables are behaviors, our actions, our emotions of sorts. Um, and I want to talk about emotions and moments. Emotions and moments. Cheryl says, I'm personally disappointed with Will's reaction. If we all act on impulse, the world would be in a worse place than we already are. Yeah, I feel you on that. Um, I think I think impulse is something that we all are challenged with. I would even go so far as to say I think the response by so many people in support of Will may not be actually in full support of his action, but this human connection to the pain that we've seen him experience over the last couple of years, this public pain, right? This public trauma, this knowing his story, right? I think there's this connection to his story that so many of us personally connect to. And I think that there's something embedded in that there's this outcry of support for him because of his pain. I think what happens is because we connect to that pain, I think many people, I don't want to speak for anyone, but this is possibly one of the, the connection points. I'm thinking that because we connect to that pain and that lived experience, that we overlook the act because the act did not end up in such a dire result. It could have, it didn't. It could have, and I think we should be mindful of that. But I also want to talk about not only emotion and moments, but also protection of womanhood, because you know the joke about alopecia and is real. The medical um, issue of it is real, um, and so I want to talk about these things these intersecting of sorts about these things. But I want to first start with a story. When I was in high school, I had a girlfriend who I loved to death. I won't call her name because we all went to high school together. A lot of us went to high school together, so I won't put her on Front Street. But I had a girlfriend that I loved to death. I mean, I just loved her, right? And so there was a guy who I remember this like it was yesterday. There was a guy who I didn't really like that much. We knew each other through some other areas of our life in high school. And this one day we were talking, we were jawing back and forth to one another, like high schoolers do, and he was trying to give it to me, and I would give it back to him, and he'd say something crude and I say something crude back to him, and he finally said something about my girlfriend, this girlfriend who I felt I was her protector. I felt, she was a sweet soul, a huge heart. I loved her dearly. He called her a B. He usually called her out by her name. He called her a B. And I remember the moment it happened, like it was yesterday, when he called her a B. Something triggered in me. It was this trigger of sorts, and I literally turned without thought, without needing of being not. I didn't need to think about it. I balled up my fist and I turned around and I punched him square in the face. Square in the face. And I remember thinking, what if I afterwards, not immediately after, but shortly after, maybe a day or two, what would have happened if I really, really harmed him? Like, what would have happened if he would have fallen and hit his head on the ground? Like, all things, anything could have happened. But it really didn't dawn on me about that moment until 15 years later in my life. Why am I saying that? I'm sharing that story because what it dawned on me later on in life was me balling my fist up and hitting him square in the face had zero, literally zero, nothing to do with him and everything to do with me. And I want to talk about yesterday with Will Smith and Chris Rock, not because to put judgment or blame on anyone, because that's a separate conversation. I want to discuss it because I believe that what happened yesterday is so polarizing for many reasons, but also because most of us connect with what transpired there in some way. We connect with the trauma of a lived experience whereby in which we feel shame, or we feel embarrassed, or we feel less than, and because we have these feelings, it festers within us, and ultimately somebody does something or says something, and it triggers us. It triggers us. It triggers us to do something that may be out of the norm. It may not. It may not be something that we would typically do, but because we were triggered, we unleashed. We just reacted. I share my personal story not to make a full comparison, but to empathize with understanding the frustration of thinking that we're doing good when we're actually operating from a place of deficit. Again, the goal here is not to judge. Operating from a place of deficit is not a denigrating statement. We operate from deficit for so many reasons. And because of those reasons, I believe so many people connect with Will in his response. But I'm interested. I'm interested in what's happening in our world where we throw our hands up at certain points. We throw our hands up to say that just because someone is being verbally abusive or not, or trying to be comedic when maybe the joke doesn't land as well, or maybe not be as funny, or it brings light to something that is actually hurtful to people. No matter what those circumstances may be, when it's a verbal, it's a language of sorts that hurts. I'm interested in why, though, there comes a point where we draw a line in the sand that says, at some point, your language will trigger my physical response. That's important to me. Again, I'm interested in your thoughts. When we talk about emotions and the power of emotion and the power of language, what are we really, what do we really understand about it? And why is last night such a great example of when lived experience, whatever it may be, plays out into a trigger moment, right? That so many of us can we fully understand that we've been in a position where we've been going through something and just, and it's just been festering and festering, and somebody somewhere does or says something to just trigger what's been festering, and we respond in a way that just is above and beyond what we ever could have imagined that we would respond like. We do something that's not in our nature. Why is it okay? And if so, why? Now, I'm not telling you it's okay or not. I'm interested because what I've seen today, more so than anything, again, are a very focused response about Will was right in his actions because we can only take but so much. I've seen that more than anything. We can, at some point, there's a breaking point, right? And I'm not here again to debate his actions. I'm here to fully understand why the conversation around that at some point when you're going through tough times, when it's difficult and people see it and it's public or not public, and you're going through and you're trying to live your best life, and things are hurtful and harmful that may be coming towards you. But aside from physically being imposed upon, at some point we're triggered through something and we act out of ourselves. We respond with a physical response. I get it. I get the trigger. I get the thought process that I just can't handle it anymore. So I have to do what I feel is the correct response. When I'm interested, do we look at it in another light? When we come to a place when we have to physically touch people and harm people, are we operating out of protection of someone? Or is it more so, are we operating out of our own inadequacies, our own trauma that we've been living, our own shame that we're trying to deal with? And I know these are big words and these are powerful words, and I don't mean to be hyperbolic, but I mean, I think it's serious enough that I see a connection here. I see it in workplaces. I see it in leaders all the time. I see a connection that we want to make it about what we believe in as opposed to what's missing. I'm going to say it again. I think we want to make this type of incident about what we believe in as opposed to what we're missing. All right, Dr. Jeff, how you doing, man? He says, well, I feel both were wrong, but I understand Hollywood. Chris wanted laughs, but failed to utilize emotional intelligence and practice empathy. Yeah. He says, Will failed to show restraint and let his emotions get the best of him. I appreciate that comment, Dr. Jeff. Appreciate that comment. I think you hit on something really pertinent here. That two things can be correct at the same time. Right? Two things can be right at the same time. Yeah, bad joke. No EI on that one. No emotional intelligence on that one, right? No EQI on his part. But no restraint on Will's. Right? Two things can be right at the same time. There's so many layers to this too, and we can't tackle all the layers. But I wanted to jump on here because I want us to stop running from the root. It's great that we can throw a post out there, a meme out there, and we can talk, we can talk high level. Yeah, I agree with them. No, I don't agree with them. But I want to talk about what's happening in workplaces because that's my space, right? I want to talk about what's happening in workplaces all around the world because it relates to what happened last night. Because I know 99.9% of everyone on here watching, if you work somewhere, if in fact someone was to do or say something to you that was insulting or demeaning to you or demeaning to your spouse or your loved one, and you walked up to them and you literally caught back and you knocked them square in the face. I'm going to bet. I'm going to bet that the consequences for you, for me, will be different. Won't play out the same way. Many of us aren't talking about the privilege that existed in that act last night. I'm going to call it what it is. And I don't have to preface that I'm a Will Smith fan. It doesn't matter if I am or not. I am, though. But there's a privilege that existed last night in that act. A big privilege, a heavy privilege, a privilege that many of us don't have. But in workplaces everywhere, people are bringing their lived experiences and trauma to work every single day. And we would not expect them, nor would we congratulate them. Maybe some will, but I wouldn't expect us to congratulate them on responding in a physically violent way towards someone's harmful words. Dr. Jeff said, totally agree, Glenn. Trauma runs deep in our culture, hence the importance of teaching our children the importance of managing their emotions. Bingo. Yeah. Look, last night happened, but I'm more concerned about how we respond to what last night is. How we acknowledge that Will Smith hitting Chris Rock had nothing to do with Chris Rock. Had nothing to do with the bad joke. Had nothing to do with the insensitivity of the joke. It had nothing to do with Jada Pinkett Smith. It had everything to do with Will Smith. It's called self-accountability. It's called self-awareness. It's called taking ownership of your actions and not conflating it with protection of womanhood. Of course we want to protect our women. Of course. Dr. Brenda, what's up, Dr. Brenda? She said, regardless of how you feel about Will or Chris, here's something to consider. If I'm doing my job, hold on, I got to read it over here. If I'm doing my job and a colleague does not agree with the way I'm doing the job and they slap me, that is assault. Correct. That is a fact. We cannot excuse bad behavior at work. A bad joke by a professional comedian should not result in assault. It's a job. He gets hired to make jokes from a different perspective. Although he came to Jada's defense, but he also minimized her voice and ability to defend herself. Totally agree with you. We're conflating some things here, folks. I'm interested in what you think about the conflation. You can't conflate protection of womanhood with insecurities and inadequacies. Listen, we have to own it. When I hauled off and hit that young man when I was in high school because he called my girlfriend the B word, that had nothing to do with him. I had inadequacies inside of me about protection of my lady. She didn't need protection from his words. They were not true. And even if they were true, they didn't necessitate me getting violent towards him physically. Put my hands on him for what? We're conflating some things. And my concern is not only are we perpetuating this idea that at some point it's okay to be violent towards one another. At what point do we love one another? Kevin, get off my live, man. Get off my live. There's always one. It's just not okay, man. That's my personal feeling. It's not okay for us to universally believe that at some point that the triggers that happen within us should result in some type of violence. We've got to do better in that construct, in that mind construct. I'm interested why so many of us have run to, again, the idea that once you've been pushed to a certain limit, that it's okay how you respond, no matter what that response is. That's the deeper question for me. Where does that come from? Where does that stem from? Because I don't think that stems from a sense of rage towards somebody. I don't think it stems from a sense of get back to somebody. I don't think it stems from protection of womanhood or protection of manhood. I don't think it stems from the other person. I believe that begins from within. Anybody that knows me and my fraternity knows that I used to throw hands. I'm gonna talk real talk. I was not afraid to throw them. It's how I expressed myself. It was the easiest choice for me. That's how I got down. I was okay with it. You got a problem? Let's put hands on it. All right, let's get physical about it. But that had nothing to do with other people. That had everything to do with me. It always has and always will have to do with me, how I express myself. What are we teaching our young people? What are we teaching our young people? And how they express their emotions, how they look inward, how they have restraint, how they show restraint. These are the conversations we should be having. And again, this is not to indict a parent or indict anybody or to denigrate anyone. But look, we got to talk about it because we're all raising kids. Many of us are raising children in some shape, form, or fashion. They see us. And though you might not say all the things to your children that you say on social media, trust and believe me, you act it out in some kind of way. Kids are very observant. Where does love have a place in this? Where does love, self-love, have a place in this? My man, Isaiah, college roommate. That's Roomy. Your college roommate is here. We do grow and learn from our past and need to show others the best way to deal with situations. No doubt, bro. Good to see you, bro. Dr. Jeff, avoidance of accountability runs rampant in organizations. Dr. Jeff, man, that's what I'm talking about with the client team right now, about accountability, about self-accountability. But the work we do is all about not being perfect, because nobody is saying, listen, I'm not canceling Will Smith, okay? Let's just get it real right here. I ain't canceling Will Smith, all right? Thanks, Dr. Jeff. I'm not canceling Will Smith right here, but what I am is I'm not going to run from the conversation. I don't think any of us should. We got to love on him. He has put a lot of himself out there in his book, in his conversations, in his talks. I mean, listen, if you've been following Will Smith for the past couple of years, we know what happened last night. It was a boiling point. I mean, he's openly talked about it. He basically didn't know what else to do, and he chose the hands. To put it mildly, he chose hands. Right? But if he chose hands, why are we not calling out what's behind that? Not Chris Rock. It's not the colleague that cussed you out at work. It's not the person who had road rage that cussed you out on the street. We're not responding to that. We're responding to something deeper. We're responding to something deeper when we get that trigger moment and we come outside of ourselves. We're responding to something deeper. And those around us know full well that it's deeper than just a bad joke. It's deeper than just calling out by somebody by their name. The empathy we must have for one another is deep. Even empathy for the person that tells the bad joke. Compassion for a person who calls out someone by their name. The compassion and empathy for people who choose what we say, quote, choose violence as opposed to love. Even when violence is through words as opposed to physical violence. Words do hurt. Words do matter. Emotion and language is powerful. I was just simply struck today in this morning by so much energy given to the act of choosing physical violence. We've got to pause here. And I'm not saying that we're talking about all the issues that are underlying in yesterday's event, because I'm not naive to think that that's the only thing that happened. There's a lot of layers around what happened last night, and I'm not going to bring them all up today because there's no need, honestly, in this forum. But I was struck. I want to talk about why I was struck by the energy behind physical violence, the support of it on today's social media platforms. From people I know and people I don't know, people I know fairly well who have big hearts and are loving, kind people who had the energy behind the violence. It says something. It says something. I think it says that we're fed up in a lot of ways, depending on who you are and where you're from. I think it says that we're tired of folks just saying all what they want to say. I think it says that we want to see more men protecting women, even though if that protection is disguised by something far deeper and graver than just a physical act. We're saying a lot in our support and our energy behind physical violence. And we can't run from it. You can't run from it. Got to be accountable to it. Where's that energy coming from? Because if that energy is coming from a place of you can only be pushed so far into where you have to physically respond, I would love to see that same energy around loving someone. I would love to see it. I would love to see the same energy around knowing that when people come at you verbally because they're hurt or they are harmed in some way, or they don't have the empathy or compassion that you would want them to have, that in turn that we're able to be compassionate and loving towards them because they're just not in a good place. It can't be. Man, violence begets violence. What would have happened if Chris Rock would have slipped and hit his head and it could have turned out worse? Would you still support the act of physical violence? What if? We have to have the conversation that's deeper than just one act that happened last night at the Oscars. We have to begin to ask ourselves, is it culture? And I'm not talking about Black culture. I'm talking about in this nation, in this world even. Why does physical violence give us so much energy? I would have rather Will Smith take the microphone and say to the audience, it was a bad joke. and bad taste. And though I wanted to slap the hell out of this man, I chose restraint because I know that he's coming from a place that's not good, an unhealthy place. And he can't understand fully to make that type of joke in the presence of my wife. I would have preferred he protect his woman through articulating through the power of words what it means to stand up and protect your woman in that way. In that way. No physical threat was on her. No physical threat was going to become of her. It was a bad, tasteless joke about something she's fighting and dealing with. And I would have loved for him to do that. Maybe next time that's what will happen. But it's a growth moment. Dr. Jeff, you're right. It's a growth moment. Hopefully it's a growth moment for all of us. I know I sat back and thought to myself, what would I have done? And it's always hindsight, but what would I do? It deepened my understanding for me in that moment of love, that love, if love is not a constant in your life, that those triggers come hard. They come hard. If self-love is not a constant in your life, if you're not practicing it, if you're not practicing compassion and forgiveness, if you're not practicing doing better in your life, or addressing the inadequacies you may feel, the shame you may feel for whatever it is, triggers come hard and fast. And when they come, they don't give you time to respond. That's why they're triggers. Happens quickly. Will Smith, for the most part, probably will not face any real consequences from last night. He's still an Oscar winner. God bless him. I'm proud of him. He's still a multi-million-dollar guy, superstar. Consequences probably won't be that drastic for him, if any at all. But the representation of the energy from supporting the act, for those of us who live in a different consequential world, there are differences. I pray you don't go on your job and physically react to a trigger. The consequences will probably be different. Keanu says he was too upset. He was too upset to pull him aside after his instinct was to protect. Bad choice in front of the company. Yeah, listen. I said to a couple of people, yeah, he was happy. I said to a couple of people, hey, man, if you really wanted to fight him, you would have waited for him in the back. And listen, I don't condone it, but listen, if that's what you really wanted to do, that public display of physical retaliation was all about, for me, I see it, it was all about the inadequacies and shame of what he's dealing with and struggling with. And I'm no therapist, I'm no psychologist, but I did stay at a Holiday Inn recently. Nah, jokes aside. That's my personal take on it. Okay. It could have gone really bad last night. I pray that that we give thought to what happened last night in a deeper context, or in broader context. I hope we give thought to what young people saw last night. I hope we give thought to our words and how we use our insights about what happened last night. I hope that we don't gloss over what last night represented. I hope that we can use it as a learning moment for what self-love and self-accountability must look like, even in the presence of emotional hurt and harm, even in the lived experience of emotional hurt and harm. It's difficult. I know this to be true, and I'm sure you do as well. But just because it's difficult doesn't mean all of our actions are to be excused. It's just not okay. So, we've been here for a minute. I appreciate you sharing with me. Any last words, any thoughts? Yeah, that was the last straw for him, Kiana. Yeah, you could tell. Any thoughts? I appreciate everyone joining us. Dr. Jeff, who else? Kiana, Isaiah, my man, Kev, even though I don't know what you're talking about, Kev. Brother Eric, appreciate everyone joining us. Hey, please take care of yourself and the ones that you love and everyone around you. I hope this talk, I hope it brought some insight for you. I hope you are going to think about it. Brenda, yeah, Brenda joined us. I hope you think about it. I appreciate you, brother. Appreciate you, Zay. Appreciate you, Twan. I hope you think about it and take it with you to your circles. Angie, Dr. Angie. What's up, ET? No doubt, man. Just listen to the playback. I hope you share it with your friends, your colleagues, and think about it more deeply. That last night was not an isolated incident. Last night is happening all around the world, in places that don't have the platform such as the Oscars. It's happening every single day. We're being violent verbally and physically to people every single day of our lives because we're being triggered by things that we live with and that we don't address ourselves in some way. The energy that we see online right now through this physical violence is about not being self-accountable to addressing what's inside of us. That's all this is about. It's deeper than that. It's deeper than the act. The act was just an act and an outcome. I want to go deeper with you. It's deeper. So if you're willing to go deeper, ask yourself, if you are a person who agrees with the act, ask yourself why. Why is it that you agree with the act of physical violence? Why is it that you agree that physical violence at some point is okay when no one has physically touched you and or harmed you? Why is that okay? It's just a question that you have to ask. We must ask because people are watching. Young people are watching. Our families are watching. The world is watching. And if you do believe, like Brother David Stanley-Rast believes, that we are all interconnected and interdependent, that we do belong together, no matter where we're from, friend or foe, family or not, that if we are connected in that way, then we must ask the deeper question, why we turn to physical violence towards one another when love is the only thing. Love is the only thing that roots out hate. That's it for me. That's it for me. I love you. I hope y'all take care of yourselves and everyone around you, all right? All right, that was it. Thanks to Angie. The value of understanding our triggers is huge. Keyword is triggers. That's right. The keyword is triggers. You're right about that. Y'all be good. All right.